The Vanguard drifted in the cold black between stars, its long steel frame lit only by the pale light of a distant red sun. The ship looked small against the endless void, yet inside its walls, tension was heavy like a storm about to break. Captain Alina Voss stood at the main viewport, her hands resting on the rail. She was tall, with sharp eyes that missed nothing, but today, those eyes carried a weight. Below them, the planet Krythos 7 glimmered black oceans, silver crystal mountains, and a thin blue atmosphere that shimmered like glass under sunlight. It was beautiful, but the beauty felt fragile. Behind her, the bridge hummed with activity. Consoles flashed, voices, some human, some alien, traded clipped updates. The air smelled faintly of ozone from the ship's power systems. Four tall, silver-skinned aliens stood near the center of the room. They were the Valeri, native to Krythos 7, and one of the most advanced members of the Intergalactic Alliance. Their leader, Ambassador Sarek, had skin that gleamed like polished metal and eyes as still as frozen water. Sarek turned his head slightly, his voice soft but cutting. "Captain Voss, your fleet's presence is appreciated, but let us be clear. This defense will be led by Valeri. Humans are here in a supportive capacity." Voss didn't look away from the planet. "We were told this was a joint operation." Sarek's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something colder. "It is, but the Threx Dominion are not an opponent you can fight with your primitive kinetic weapons and thin hull plating. When battle begins, your ships will hold at safe distance." Commander Malik Reyes, Voss's second in command, shifted uncomfortably beside her. He muttered under his breath. Translation: "They think we'll just sit in the corner and clap." Voss's jaw tightened. She had dealt with this attitude before. Humans had only joined the Alliance 20 years ago, and while they had shown courage in smaller skirmishes, their technology lagged far behind the ancient starfaring civilizations. Plasma shields, wormhole drives, planet-cracking beams, humanity had none of these. What they did have was a stubborn refusal to quit, but that didn't show well in war councils. Out in the dark, Krythos 7 rotated slowly, unaware of the danger, moving toward it. The enemy, the Threx Dominion, were like a shadow that swallowed light. Massive insectoid war machines, they consumed worlds, strip mining their crust and leaving them dead husks. 2 days ago, an Alliance patrol had been torn apart on the edge of the Krythos system. Now, the Threx fleet was coming here. Voss could feel the tension in her crew. Lieutenant Aria Holt, barely 24, kept glancing at her console, as if hoping the threat would vanish. Chief Engineer Darius Cole stood with his arms folded, his oil-stained jumpsuit smelling faintly of grease and coffee. Even in space, humans had not lost the habit of fixing things with their own 2 hands. A faint alarm chirped. Reyes frowned at the tactical screen. "Captain, I'm picking up gravimetric distortions in high orbit. Multiple points. They're faint, but..." He didn't finish. They all knew what that meant. Voss stepped closer to the display. Dozens of tiny ripples appeared on the map, bending light and energy around them. To an untrained eye, they were nothing. To her, they were teeth in the dark. "That's not a forward approach," Reyes said quietly. "That's an encirclement pattern." Sarek tilted his head, his voice calm as if discussing the weather. "Impossible. The Threx do not have stealth capability in deep orbit. It must be sensor error." But Voss had seen this before. Years ago, during the Battle of Titan's Edge, she had watched Threx ships use asteroid shadows to mask their movements before striking from every angle at once. Her chest tightened. "It's not an error. They're already here." The bridge grew quiet. The Valeri delegates exchanged uneasy glances, their perfect composure cracking for the first time. Reyes turned to her, voice urgent now. "If they've surrounded the planet, the main fleet's going to walk straight into a crossfire." Voss's mind raced. The Alliance plan had been simple. Meet the Threx head-on as they entered the system. Keep them away from Krythos 7's orbit. But if the Threx were already in orbit, then the Valeri warcruisers would be charging right into a trap. Sirik spoke sharply. We will transmit this to the fleet command. They will decide our next. The ship's lights dimmed for half a second. A low hum filled the air, not from the Vanguard, but from outside. The sound wasn't real, but it pressed into their ears all the same, like the hum of a predator before the strike. On the tactical display, the distortions resolved into shapes. Long, jagged silhouettes with glowing green eyes. The Threx ships. Dozens of them. Some were as small as the Vanguard. Others were so large they blotted out the stars. Reyes whispered, God help us. They're not waiting. In an instant, the blackness of space erupted into light. Beams of green plasma lashed across the void, slamming into the Alliance's forward scouts. One Valeri cruiser exploded in a blinding flash, scattering molten fragments into Krythos 7's upper atmosphere. Voss's heart pounded, but her voice was steady. Shields up, battle stations. Sirik turned toward her, his voice rising for the first time. No, you will retreat to the outer system. The Vanguard cannot withstand this assault. But Voss didn't move toward retreat. She looked at Reyes, then at her crew. We're not leaving. Not while the fleet walks into that kill zone. Sirik's metallic features hardened. You will be destroyed. Voss's gaze stayed fixed on the enemy shapes, sliding into position around the planet. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the chaos. Then we'll make sure we take some of them with us. In that moment, the Vanguard turned its nose toward the darkness, toward the trap, and accelerated. The humans were going in. The Vanguard surged forward, its engines glowing white against the blackness of space. Inside, the deck vibrated, with the hum of acceleration. Krythos 7's silver-blue curve loomed closer, but so did the shadows, the jagged shapes of the Threx fleet tightening their net. On the bridge, the air felt heavy. Every crew member could feel it, the sense of being small in the face of something vast and merciless. Lieutenant Arya Holt swallowed hard as her hands moved over the controls. They're locking weapons on us, Captain. Captain Alina Voss stood steady in the center, her voice firm. Let them. Keep our course. Beside her, Commander Malik Reyes frowned at the tactical display. Red icons, enemy ships, flickered all around. If they get us in a crossfire, we won't last 30 seconds. Then we won't give them the chance, Voss replied. A warning siren screamed. A beam of green plasma lanced past the bow, so close that the viewport lit up as if a sun had just flared in front of them. The blast missed, barely, but the heat shimmered against the Vanguard's shields. Boom. Another shot hit, rocking the deck. Sparks flew from a side console, and one crewman stumbled, grabbing a railing. Reyes steadied himself. That was a glancing hit. Shields holding at 72%. In the corner, Ambassador Sirik clung to a railing, his perfect calm cracking under the vibration. This is suicide. You cannot face the Threx head-on with your primitive vessel. Voss ignored him. She was watching the enemy formation. There was something about the way the Threx ships were moving, too deliberate, too slow to engage all at once. She realized why. They weren't just trying to destroy the Vanguard. They were waiting for the Valeri war fleet to arrive, so they could slaughter them in one perfect ambush. They're going to hold position until the main fleet jumps in, she murmured. Reyes nodded grimly. And when the Valeri come out of hyperspace, they'll be surrounded. Voss finished. A new voice cut through the tension. Darius Cole, the chief engineer, had entered the bridge, wiping his hands on an already oil-stained rag. Captain, I've been listening to the comms chatter. The Valeri fleet hasn't changed course. They're walking right into it. Mind raced. There was no time to send a detailed warning. The Threx could jam communications at any moment. Maybe they already were. She had one option: punch through the enemy's outer ring and get close enough to send a direct signal. She turned Holt. Bring us to attack speed. Reyes, pick me a hole in their lines. Reyes's brow furrowed. Hole? More like a crack in a mountain. Then we'll make it wider, she said. The vanguard tilted sharply, the inertial dampeners groaning under the strain. In front of them, a cluster of 3 Threx frigates moved in a slow arc, their black armor glistening with green veins of energy. The ships looked alive, insect shells plated over machinery, long blade-like protrusions swept from their hulls, and their weapon arrays pulsed with light. Holt's voice was tense. They see us coming. The first Threx frigate fired. Plasma fire streaked past, missing by meters. The second shot caught the Vanguard's port side. The deck jolted violently, throwing several crew against the walls. Cole cursed. Port shields down to 50. One more like that, and we're leaking atmosphere. Keep going, Voss ordered. They closed the gap. At this range, the enemy ships towered over them like skyscrapers in the void. The Vanguard's smaller size gave it speed, a desperate kind of agility. Reyes triggered the ship's forward cannons. The old human-made weapons spat streaks of tungsten slugs, crude compared to Alliance plasma, but each slug hit, with a deep, dull thud, against the Threx hull. Sparks scattered. One slug tore through an exposed vent, and the enemy ships. Lights flickered. Holt blinked in disbelief. That actually hurt them. The Threx frigates shifted formation. The stars rippled as hyperspace tore open. One by one, the Valeri warcruisers emerged, sleek silver shapes, each the size of a small city, with crystal spires rising from their hulls. Their arrival lit the dark in 1,000 white beams, like a fleet of gods descending. For a moment, Captain Elena Voss felt a flicker of hope. Then she saw the truth. The Threx Dominion moved with cold precision, closing the circle around Krythos 7. The big Valeri ships sailed straight into the ring, unaware they were stepping into the jaws of the enemy, on the Vanguard's bridge. Commander Malik Reyes slammed his hand against the console. They're too deep already. They don't see it. Send the warning again, Voss ordered. Still jammed. They're blind. Voss's jaw tightened. This wasn't just bad positioning. It was a slaughter waiting to happen. The warcruisers were powerful, but the Threx had numbers, angles, and the element of surprise. She had seen this pattern before in human history books. Ancient battles where armies were encircled and crushed. Only this time, it was happening on a planetary scale. The voice of Ambassador Sarek came sharp from behind her. Your role is done, Captain. Retreat to the outer system before your vessel is destroyed. Voss didn't turn. If we retreat now, the Valeri will be wiped out. Krythos 7 will fall within the hour. That is not your concern. Voss turned then, her eyes locking on Syrinx. When an enemy wipes out your allies, it is your concern. We don't leave people behind. For a moment, the alien said nothing, but the faint tightening around his mouth betrayed discomfort. The Valeri prided themselves on composure, but this human stubbornness was not something they knew how to handle. The Vanguard shook as a Threx salvo grazed the aft shields. Red lights flickered across the bridge. Darius Cole, the chief engineer, muttered from his station. Shields down to 65%. We can take maybe 3 more of those before we start leaking atmosphere. Then we make our hits count, Voss said. Malik, bring up our old friends. Reyes raised an eyebrow. You mean, yes? The rail batteries. Syric's metallic eyes widened. You cannot be serious. Those projectile launchers are obsolete. Even the weakest Threx armor will render them useless. Cole grinned. Faintly. Yeah, that's what everyone thinks. The Valeri didn't know, most of the Alliance didn't, that humans had a habit of keeping outdated tech around. Not out of sentiment, but because sometimes the old ways could be twisted into something new. The Vanguard's rail batteries weren't just relics from before humanity joined the Alliance. They'd been rebuilt in Cole's machine shop over the last year. They didn't fire plasma or laser beams. They fired solid tungsten slugs, small, dense, and brutally fast. At close range, shields had trouble reacting in time to a hit that was pure kinetic force. Voss knew the Threx wouldn't expect it. Reyes was already aligning the targeting systems. Got a light cruiser in range, heading for the Valeri's left flank. Fire 2 rounds, Voss ordered. The Vanguard's hull thrummed as the railguns spat their first shot. No flash of light, just a faint shimmer in the void as the slug tore forward at hypervelocity. A second shot followed. The Threx cruiser's shields flared, trying to catch the impacts, but the slugs punched through, burying themselves in the ship's hull. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the enemy ship's forward plating shattered, venting green-tinged atmosphere and chunks of burning debris into space. On the bridge, Holt's eyes went wide. It worked. Cole smirked. Told you. No one respects the classics until it's too late. Sarek looked unsettled. This is inefficient weaponry. It cannot be relied upon in sustained combat. Voss stepped closer to the viewport. Maybe not for you, but for us. It's just getting started. The Vanguard rolled to port, avoiding another Threx beam. Reyes lined up another shot, this time at a battleship moving to cut off the Valeri flagship. Both slugs struck low along its hull, and though they didn't destroy it outright, they forced a massive vessel to slow, giving the Valeri a narrow escape corridor. Holt called out from sensors. Valeri fleet is shifting. Looks like they're reacting to our attacks. Changing formation. Voss's pulse quickened. If she could keep punching holes in the Threx ring, even for minutes at a time, the Valeri might regroup. But it came at a cost. The Vanguard jolted violently. Alarms screamed. Cole cursed. Direct hit to starboard. Shield sections gone. Hull integrity holding, but we're running on borrowed time. Voss gripped the railing, feeling the deck shake under her boots. She knew the risk. Every second they stayed, the Threx focused more fire on them. The Vanguard was now the center of attention for half the enemy fleet. Reyes glanced at her, his voice low. Captain, you know we can't do this forever. We don't need forever, Voss said. We just need long enough for them to realize we're not running. Another barrage shook the ship. Holt was shouting damage reports. Cole was yelling at someone in engineering to reroute power. And through it all, Voss stood still. Her gaze locked on the enemy ships ahead. In that chaos, she felt something deep, the same feeling she'd had as a young officer. The same reason she'd stayed in the fleet after wars had taken friends and left scars. It wasn't about orders. It wasn't about politics. It was about standing in the gap when no one else could. She looked over at Sarek, who was watching her now with something almost like respect. You want to know the difference between humans and everyone else in your alliance, she said. We don't care if the weapon is old or weak. In our hands, if it's all we've got, it becomes deadly. The Valeri didn't answer. Outside, the railguns fired again. The Vanguard's railguns boomed again, sending 2 more tungsten slugs into the black void. One slug punched clean through a Threx escort ship, splitting it in half like a cracked shell. The other slammed into an enemy destroyer's rear thrusters, sending it spinning out of formation. On the bridge, the crew cheered for a heartbeat, before another blast shook them back to reality. The Vanguard was still surrounded. Every shot they fired bought only a few seconds. Captain Alina Voss steadied herself against the railing. The smell of burned circuitry, mixed with the metallic tang of recycled air. The ship's heartbeat, the thrum of its engines, was uneven now. They couldn't keep this up forever. And yet, in that moment, Voss felt a grim satisfaction. The Threx hadn't expected this. No one in the Alliance had, because no one believed in railguns anymore. 4 months earlier, in the dim light of the Vanguard's machine shop, Darius Cole crouched over a long steel barrel mounted on the deck. He was covered in grease, his hair tied back with a frayed strip of cloth. The place smelled of hot metal and oil. Commander Malik Reyes stood with his arms crossed, skeptical. "You're wasting your time, Cole. The Alliance says these things are outdated for a reason." Cole didn't look up from his work. "Yeah, because they've got fancy shields and endless plasma. We don't. We've got steel, magnets, and a bad attitude." Voss entered quietly, listening. Cole was working on one of the Vanguard's 2 railgun batteries, weapons that had been decommissioned before she was even born. In an Alliance fleet, they were a joke. On a human ship, they were a gamble. "Explain it," Voss said. Cole grinned faintly, wiping his hands. "Plasma and lasers. Shields are designed to handle those. But a solid slug moving at 20 kilometers a second, that's physics, Captain. Shields have to react to incoming force, and they can't react fast enough to stop something they don't expect. If we hit the right spot, we punch through." Reyes frowned. "Or we bounce off and waste our time." Cole shrugged. "Every weapon's useless if you don't know how to use it. Thing is, everyone else threw these away. The Threx, they've never fought against one, which means they won't be ready." Voss looked at the barrel, her mind already turning over the idea. Humans had always survived by turning weaknesses into strengths. Maybe this would be no different. Now the Vanguard banked hard to avoid another Threx beam, the inertial dampeners. Groaning under the strain, Reyes barked orders over the comms, moving gunners into position. "Target the cruiser on the Valeri flagship's starboard side. Let's see if we can open them a door," Voss ordered. The ship's hull shuddered as the railguns fired again. Both slugs struck the cruiser's midsection. One bounced, but the other tore straight through, venting atmosphere and forcing the ship to veer away. Holt's voice was sharp from sensors. "Valeri flagship is moving. They're pulling out of the ring." Voss exhaled slowly. One gap in the circle. Not enough, but it was a start. The enemy reacted fast. 3 Threx destroyers broke formation, moving toward the Vanguard. Their weapons glowed an eerie green. "Incoming," Reyes shouted. Cole's voice crackled over comms from engineering. "Captain, if we're going to survive the next volley, I can push a power surge to the forward shields, but it'll drain our starboard completely." Voss didn't hesitate. "Do it." The forward shields flared bright as the Threx fired. 2 blasts splashed harmlessly across the Vanguard's bow. The third slammed into the unshielded starboard. The deck jolted violently. A pipe burst overhead, spraying cold steam. "Hull breach on decks 3 and 4. Holt called out. "Containment fields holding." Voss steadied herself. Every move was a trade. Protection in one direction meant vulnerability in another. But that was the fight. Humans didn't win by overpowering. They won by outthinking. She glanced at Reyes. "Time to change the rules. Plot a course into the debris field." His brow F. The Vanguard burst from Krythos 7's thin upper atmosphere, its hull glowing faintly from the heat of re-entry. The sky behind them shimmered with debris and fire wreckage from the Threx destroyers they had left broken. On the bridge, every crew member felt it, a change in the air. For the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were fighting back. Captain Alina Voss leaned forward over the tactical display. Enemy icons still surrounded Krythos 7, but the ring was looser now. A few Threx ships had shifted position to avoid the chaos the Vanguard was creating. "We've got their attention," Commander Malik Reyes said. "All of it." "Good," Voss replied. "Let's give them a reason to regret it. Find me their biggest ship in range." Holt's fingers danced over her console. "Captain, I've got one. Threx Dreadnought, Class Alpha. It's leading the fleet on the northern arc." The Dreadnought appeared on the display, a vast, jagged fortress bristling with weapons. Its hull looked like the exoskeleton of some ancient predator, and its energy signature dwarfed everything else nearby. Reyes frowned. That thing's a fortress. Even the Valeri would need a full squadron to take it down. We're not going to take it down, Voss said quietly. We're going to cripple it. The Vanguard turned, engines roaring. From the dreadnought's perspective, the human ship must have looked like an insect rushing toward a giant's foot. The Threx didn't move to evade. They didn't have to. They believed their shields and armor made them invincible. Railguns ready? Voss asked. Cole's voice came over, comes from engineering. Locked, loaded, and humming like a hungry beast. Target the primary forward weapon array, Voss ordered. Put all power into the guns. The crew braced as the Vanguard roared closer. The dreadnought loomed in the viewport now, so large it filled the glass. Turrets turned toward them, glowing green. Incoming fire, Holt shouted. A beam of plasma slashed across space, missing by meters. The Vanguard dove under it, then rolled hard to avoid another shot. The deck rattled with the shock waves of near misses. Rhea's voice was sharp. 30 seconds to firing range. Another blast struck their port side. Alarms blared. Sparks erupted from a console. Cole's voice came again, urgent but steady. Port shields at 20%. Hull integrity stable, for now. Voss's hands tightened on the railing. Stay on course. This is our shot. The moment they crossed into range, the Vanguard's railguns fired, both barrels releasing tungsten slugs at impossible speed. The recoil rattled the entire ship out in the silence that followed. 2 faint flashes bloomed against the dreadnought's shields. For a moment, it looked like nothing had happened. Then Holt gasped. Captain, we broke through. The first slug had punched a hole clean through the dreadnought's forward plating. The second slammed deep into the weapon array, shattering the housing. A chain of explosions rippled across the dreadnought's nose, its main cannon dying in a bloom of green fire. On the Vanguard, the crew erupted in cheers. Even Reyes allowed himself a grin. That'll get their attention. But Voss didn't. Relax. We're not done. Hit their port thrusters. Make them drift. The railguns boomed again. One slug missed. The other struck low, tearing into the dreadnought's maneuvering systems. The massive ship lurched sideways, colliding with a smaller Threx cruiser and sending it spinning away. The dreadnought was crippled, weapons gone, movement slow, and in that gap, the Valeri saw their chance. From the far side of the ring, silver, Valeri warcruisers surged forward, their crystal lances blazing. They struck the Threx flank, tearing through ships that had been guarding the dreadnought. The Alliance fleet began to push. They're moving, Holt shouted. The Valeri are actually pressing forward. Sirik, standing near the rear of the bridge, stared at the tactical map in disbelief. This is impossible. No Valeri strategy predicted this outcome. Voss's voice was calm but hard. Maybe you should start writing strategies that include humans. But the fight wasn't over. The Threx weren't retreating. If anything, the loss of the dreadnought made them angrier. 3 heavy cruisers turned toward the Vanguard, their weapons already glowing. Reyes glanced at Voss. Captain, we're about to get swarmed. Cole's voice cut in, over comms. Captain, I can give you one more full-power railgun volley before the coils overheat. After that, we're running on prayers. Voss looked at the tactical display, thinking fast. The enemy cruisers were coming from different angles. If they converged, the Vanguard wouldn't last a minute. She pointed to a dense cluster of wreckage near the dreadnought. Helm, take us through that debris field. Full speed. Cole, prep. Those guns. Reyes line up a shot the second we break out the other side. The Vanguard dove into the drifting wreckage. Chunks of shattered hull and twisted crystals scraped against their shields. Enemy fire followed them in, but the debris broke the beams into scattered flashes when they burst out the far side. One of the cruisers was directly ahead, close enough that its hull details were visible. Fire, Voss ordered. The rest screamed. Both slugs hit the cruiser's midsection, punching straight through. The ship's reactor went critical, exploding in a sphere of green fire. The shockwave rolled the Vanguard, but they righted themselves in time to see the remaining 2 cruisers turning away, wary now. On the bridge, the crew's breathing was ragged, but their eyes burned with new energy. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were hurting the enemy. Voss looked around at her crew, then out at the stars where the Threx ring was beginning to break apart under Valeri pressure. We've got them rattled. Now we keep pushing until they break. Somewhere deep inside her, she knew the battle would cost them more before it was done. But for the first time, the humans weren't the ones being underestimated. They were the ones being feared. The Vanguard drifted in the shadow of the crippled Threx dreadnought, its hull battered and glowing faintly where plasma fire had scraped past shields. Inside, the air was thick with tension and the scent of overheated machinery. Sparks arced across consoles, flickering in the dim light. Captain Alina Voss leaned over the railing, her jaw tight. Every second brought new danger. They had wounded the enemy, but the Threx were relentless. Every ship the Vanguard destroyed seemed to summon 2 more. Shields are holding at 30%, Captain, reported Malik Reyes, his voice strained. We won't last long under sustained fire. Voss's eyes scanned the tactical display. The Valeri fleet was regrouping, but the Threx were adapting. Their movements were slower now, cautious, but deadly. We hold the line, she said, her voice quiet but steel-hard. We can't let Krythos 7 become another graveyard. In the corner, Lieutenant Aria Holt worked the sensors, sweat beading on her forehead. Captain, we've taken more hits than I can count. Hull breaches on decks 3, 6, and 8. Containment fields are holding, but just barely. Keep working, Voss replied. Every second counts. The ship shuddered violently as another Threx salvo slammed into the starboard side. Sparks flew from a control panel, and a piece of shrapnel ricocheted across the deck, narrowly missing Darius Cole, who cursed under his breath. Hull integrity is down to 60% overall, he said, voice tight. Forward shields won't last another hit. Holt looked up, her voice trembling slightly. Captain, do we have enough railgun ammo left for a full strike? Voss's hands tightened on the railing. She thought of the plan, the one chance they had to break the enemy line completely. The railguns were old and dangerous to fire continuously, but if they could land another crippling blow, the Threx would falter long enough for the Valeri to push through. Yes, she said, her voice steady, but we have to make it count. A sudden alarm cut through the bridge. The Threx were closing in again, faster this time. 2 heavy cruisers flanked them from port and starboard. Their energy weapons glowed ominously, pulsing with lethal intent. Reyes clenched his jaw. Captain, if we don't maneuver, we're done for. Voss met his gaze. Then we maneuver. The Vanguard twisted and rolled, weaving between enemy fire. The hull groaned under the strain. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. Crew members grabbed railings to steady themselves as the ship lurched violently. Holt shouted over the alarms. Incoming, port side. Cole's voice was tense but controlled. Divert all remaining power to forward shields. We might make it. The Vanguard shuddered as a beam slammed into the shields. The console flickered, then lit up with a warning. Shield failure imminent. Captain, Reyes shouted. If we don't fire soon, we'll be sitting ducks. Voss didn't hesitate. Cole, ready the railguns, full charge. Target the lead cruiser. The ship's old weapons hummed as electricity arced along the barrels. Sparks danced across the floor. Crew members braced themselves. The Vanguard pitched forward, engines roaring as it accelerated toward the enemy. The first railgun fired. The recoil shook the entire deck. Holt's fingers flew across the sensors, guiding the shot. Direct hit. She shouted. The heavy cruiser shuddered as the slug tore through its shields and hull, exposing glowing green internals. The second shot followed immediately, hitting a critical engine section. Sparks and fire erupted, sending the massive ship spinning into debris. For a moment, the bridge was silent, except for the crew's ragged breathing. Voss finally spoke. "One down. Keep moving." But victory came at a cost. Alarms blared as another beam struck the Vanguard's aft shields. Sparks flew, and the deck tilted dangerously. Holt cried out as a panel. The Vanguard sliced through the chaos of the battlefield, sparks and smoke trailing from hull breaches. Every corner of the ship vibrated with energy, the shudders of near misses, the recoil of railguns, the hum of damaged engines struggling to keep pace. Captain Alina Voss gripped the railing, eyes locked on the tactical display. The Threx had lost several cruisers, but they still surrounded Krythos 7, their movements deliberate, deadly. "We're outnumbered and outgunned," Commander Malik Reyes said, jaw tight. "We can't hold them off forever." "Then we don't hold them," Voss said, calm and resolute. "We outsmart them." The crew exchanged glances. Outnumbered, outgunned, and still fighting, that had always been humanity's way. The Vanguard's small size and agility gave them an advantage. No one expected. "Sensors," Voss called. "Find me a pattern in their formation." Lieutenant Arya Holt studied the display, her fingers flying across controls. "They're moving like a net, trying to trap the Valeri fleet, but their rotations aren't synchronized. There's a blind spot near their rear flank, just wide enough for a small ship to slip through." Voss's eyes glinted. "That's our doorway." The plan was dangerous. Too dangerous for any other species. But humans thrived in danger, in improvisation, in turning what seemed weak into power. "Cole, prepare the railguns for maximum punch," Voss said. "We're going through their blind spot, taking out a key ship, and then retreating before they know what hit them." Cole nodded, adjusting the magnetic coils, sweat gleaming on his forehead. "I'll give you one shot, Captain. One big shot. After that, we'll need repairs we don't have time for." The Vanguard surged forward, engines flaring. Sparks from damaged panels danced across the deck. Every crew member gritted their teeth, knowing the risk. "Approaching blind spot," Holt called. "Targeting Threx command cruiser, the one coordinating the northern arc." Voss leaned forward. "Fire the railguns on my mark." The crew held their collective breath. "Mark." The two slugs screamed from the barrels, streaking toward the massive cruiser. For a moment, space seemed to hold its breath. Then the first slug hit the shield with a crackling burst of light. Nothing seemed to happen. But the second slug punched through the weakened shield and slammed into the hull. The cruiser shuddered violently, sparks and green energy flaring as internal systems overloaded. For the first time, the Threx fleet's coordination faltered. One by one, ships hesitated, unsure where to move. Reyes let out a low whistle. "They're frozen. They didn't expect that." "Of course not," Voss said. "No one expects humans to take the weak and turn it into deadly precision." The Vanguard didn't stop. They weaved through the blind spot, dodging beams and debris, giving the Valeri fleet time to strike at the exposed flank. The massive Threx command cruiser, crippled and unable to maneuver, became a beacon for Valeri fire. Plasma lances and energy beams tore through its armor, explosions rippling across the battlefield. Holt's voice was awed. "Captain, we did it. The Valeri are moving in, and they'll keep moving," Voss said, eyes still sharp, "because we forced the first crack in their line." Outside, the battlefield had changed. The Threx fleet, once a tight, unbreakable net, was scattered, forced to react instead of act. Smaller ships hesitated, unsure where to move. Their confidence faltered, their dominance shaken by a single human ship and a couple of old railguns even. Ambassador Sarek, metallic and precise, watched in disbelief. How did a single vessel disrupt their formation?" he muttered. Voss's eyes flicked to him. "Because it's not just the vessels, Sarek. It's the crew. Humans never give up, even when the odds are impossible. And we never fight by the rules others expect us to. The Vanguard had little time to celebrate. Another salvo rocked the ship as a Threx destroyer, recovering from the chaos, struck with a green-hot beam. Sparks flew across the bridge, panels smoked, and the deck lurched violently. Hull integrity at 35%, Cole shouted. Forward shields failing. Then we rely on maneuvering, Voss said. Reyes, plot an evasive course through the debris field ahead. Halt, keep sensors tight. We're threading a needle now. The crew moved as one, their fear tempered by training, trust, and sheer determination. The Vanguard darted between wreckage, scraping past giant shards of crystal and twisted hulls. The Threx fired blindly, missing more often than hitting. They can't hit us in here, Holt shouted, a laugh breaking through her fear. Voss allowed herself a small smile. Exactly. Let them chase shadows while we punch their line again. Another railgun volley struck a Threx cruiser near the fleet's center. The ship groaned and exploded, debris scattering into the void. The remaining Threx ships faltered, turning inward as confusion spread like wildfire. Reyes leaned over the console, eyes wide. Captain, they're breaking. They're actually breaking. Not completely, Voss said. But enough. Enough to give Krythos 7 a chance to breathe, and the Valeri a chance to regroup. That's all we need. The crew shared a brief, triumphant glance. Sweat, fear, and exhaustion lined their faces, but their hearts burned with the same determination that had carried humanity through countless, impossible situations. We may be small, Voss said quietly, voice carrying across the bridge, but a small spark can start a fire that nothing can stop. Outside the viewport, the stars were bright with the scattered glow of battle. The Threx fleet's tight net had been torn. The Valeri surged forward, their ships blazing like silver arrows. The Vanguard, battered but unbroken, prepared for the next strike. Humans had turned weakness into cunning, fear into action. The battle's tide had begun to turn, and the crew knew somehow, against impossible odds, they could win. And for the first time, they believed it. The Vanguard floated among the wreckage of the Threx fleet, battered and smoking. Hull breaches glowed faintly, and the hum of damaged engines reverberated through the deck. Outside, the battlefield had changed entirely. The once unbreakable Threx net was shattered, their formations broken and desperate. Captain Elena Voss stood at the viewport, her eyes scanning the chaos. The Valeri fleet, emboldened by the humans' unexpected strike, was pressing the advantage. But the battle wasn't over. One final, massive Threx warship remained, a juggernaut of metal and spikes, moving with deadly purpose toward Krythos 7. That's the last one, Commander Malik Reyes said, voice tight. If it reaches the planet, Krythos 7 is lost. Then we make it not reach the planet, Voss replied, jaw firm. Inside the bridge, the crew braced themselves. Every console beeped warnings of damage and low power. Sparks danced across floors. Crew members clutched railings, sweat and grime lining their faces. Fear and exhaustion were heavy in the air, but determination burned hotter. Coal, railguns, Voss asked. Ready, Captain? Maximum charge. One shot. If it hits, it'll cripple the warship, Cole said, voice steady, despite the tension. Holt, sensors, Voss asked. Locked on, targeting the central reactor. One slug straight through if it works. Voss gave the order. Do it, the railguns roared. Electricity arced along the barrels, humming through the hull. The crew braced themselves as the first tungsten slug tore through the void. Time seemed to stretch. The second slug followed almost instantly. Outside, the massive Threx warship flinched. Its shields flared, struggled, and finally failed. A direct hit tore through its main reactor, sparking explosions along its hull. The massive ship shuddered violently, then lurched off course, crippled and helpless. Holt shouted in disbelief. Captain, It worked. The slug penetrated the reactor. It's going critical. The crew erupted, a mixture of cheers and tears. Even Cyric, metallic and precise, allowed a small, stunned exhale. I cannot believe it. Humans. Voss's voice was calm, but her eyes shone. Never underestimate what humans can do with what everyone else thinks is useless. The Threx juggernaut exploded in a brilliant cascade of green energy, debris scattering like fireworks across the stars. The remaining Threx ships, leaderless and demoralized, began retreating. The Valeri surged forward, their crystal lances blazing, finishing the rout. On the bridge, the crew of the Vanguard sat back, exhausted but victorious. Sparks still flickered, alarms still echoed faintly, but the battle was won. Humanity's stubbornness, courage, and clever use of obsolete railguns had turned the tide. Voss walked slowly along the bridge, glancing at each crew member. You all did it. Against impossible odds, we didn't just survive, we led. The way Reyes nodded, voice low. I never thought a single ship with a couple of old weapons could do this, but we did. Cole smirked faintly, wiping grime from his face. Told you. Just needed the right hands, and the right moment. Hands that never gave up, Voss said. She turned to the viewport, watching the Threx retreat into the void. Hands that fought when everyone else said we couldn't. That's humanity. The planet Krythos 7 below was scarred, but alive. Cities had survived. Colonies were intact. Fires burned in some areas, but relief ships were already beginning to land. The humans aboard the Vanguard felt a weight lift from their shoulders, a mixture of pride, exhaustion, and awe. Holt whispered, almost to herself. We actually did it. We saved them. Voss put a hand on her shoulder. We all did. Not just the ship, not just the weapons. All of us. Humans have a stubbornness that nothing can match, courage that no machine can replicate, and hearts that refuse to quit. Reyes leaned back, shaking his head in disbelief.